academic side is just pulled, and he just doesn't know where to listen to. And sometimes just having that constant, you come to me for this, these guys are clearly for this area. And I think that's one of the big things we sit down with our founders when we make an investment and say, these are the guys you go to for this area.
And filter the advice.
Absolutely, because that will affect your timing the whole way through.
You were saying also things take longer. I don't think I've heard of many companies that go faster than expected.
We've got to.
Like in coffee, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I heard I was discussing with some Chinese friends recently, and they're like, "Oh, this is all a club deal," and it's
I think it's 4,900 units now. 4,900.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
One point I want to cover is deep tech very often is linked to universities and research centers, and one of the problems we see is the cap table. These kind of companies sometimes get out of university. You have an inventor who's not willing or not fit to run the company, who has maybe 20%. The university wants to get their money back, so they take like 55, 60%. But the poor guy or girl is going to run the company, start with 10%, and then will get diluted. So it's really a challenge for investors sometimes.
That's one thing we've seen with US US universities and also places like University of Waterloo, that they have very generous IP policy, because they're more about, you could say, relying on the generosity of the founders once they succeed, essentially. But a lot of public universities don't work this way in Europe, and that can be a barrier.
And the IP is always an issue as well. At what point does the IP transfer from the university to, and a lot of universities want to hang on to that because that's where they see the value.
And the question is also what is the core of the startup if they don't develop themselves?
Yeah, and there's no value. So unless that value is moved in, you don't get the interest from VCs. So it's not funded, and so it is a bit of a catch-22 for universities. And you can understand their perspective, because if they provide or spin out the IP too early, then perhaps they don't get any value back from it. Yeah, but there's a happy medium.
I think the US universities kind of played the long game with the alumni networks, and that seems to work well. Okay, I think that's pretty much all for my questions, and I hope you do have two. We're going to take about 15 minutes of questions, I think. And Martin, first out.
Martin Yannick. We haven't even touched much on product market fit and market entry strategy, but my question along with it is launch customers. If you are an investor in a startup who needs a launch customer, what are the do's and don'ts that you advise your startup to be careful, or the do's and don'ts for a launch customer?
You mean a commercial launch or pilot?
No, commercial.
Okay, first customer, how do you handle that if there's a specific way?
I mean, generally you don't rely on one.
Yep.
You have multiple customers. You're looking at that product market fit, and you want that validation more broadly in the market. So even if you cannot announce multiple launch customers, because generally you want to, at the stage that companies are, they want to build their PR and create awareness in the market. So you may launch with one, but always have several in the background, where you're doing POCs, where you're doing trials, where you're evaluating the commercial strategy, the pricing strategy. Don't wait to have those discussions. And it's funny you mentioned in your presentation, I always say to our companies early, get your ugly baby out there. It doesn't matter. They will tell you. Most corporates thrive on being able to provide feedback. You just have to get it out there. Don't protect it.
Any other?
I think what you say is aim at the right level. Sometimes you may dream of selling to Google and Amazon, but actually getting OVH, which is kind of a tier 2, I guess, player that maybe it's not that bad.
One cloud customer.
Yeah, cloud customer, yeah. So aim at the right level.
So the one that may be less flashy, but with whom you can work closely
go
and
faster,
faster.
get the revenue, yeah.
Okay, that sounds sensible.
And I'd say underneath it, make sure, I'm probably a bit too technical on it, but I'd say make sure that we're getting evidence of what they consider successful rollout is. Because all we're saying, I've got my thing, there it is.
What are their KPIs?
What are their KPIs? And the other thing I make our companies do very early on is in the actual sales process, make sure the customer success team are brought in to the sales process early enough. Because if not, it's something like, there it is, take it, woo, crack on. And it doesn't really necessarily pan out in that way.
There's a lot of customers that just do like pilots and pilots and pilots
Correct.
and never get to a commercial scale. Even though it looks like a commercial launch, it actually doesn't.
I think it probably also makes sense to get a cluster of customers with a similar use case. So that because there are a lot more laggards than there are leading edge adopters in the corporate world. So I think everybody wants to be like the second or third to adopt, not the first. So if you have like one in a finance use case and one in a manufacturing use case and one in this other different area, then it can be hard to get the next customers.
But how do you deal with exclusivity requirements? I mean, it can be very narrow, it can be very
Exclusivity.
broad,
You
it can be
basically
tiny.
you never really give exclusivity.
That's
I
it.
think. I think that there are certain limited circumstances in which you might give sort
Maybe
of
for one category of
category
period of
and
time.
usually has performance guarantees to it. So like if you would take my entire production,
That's it.
then you can maybe get time limited exclusivity when you prove that you really do it.
At a much higher price, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
What's interesting also is that through discussion with Chambers, he mentioned that, and also with the corporate development team of IBM, they mentioned that basically the most exciting for them in a startup is when one of their corporate customers, one of the IBM or Cisco's customers, comes to them and say, hey, we're actually buying stuff from this startup, you should check them out. And that gets them crazy because they're like, either this startup is doing something that they're not doing or they're doing something they're doing but better. That's the best track to an acquisition because they don't really care about your sales. What they care about is, have you sold to one of my customers that I happen to have like 1,000 of? And then they can, pump everything, pump your product through their channels and then scale you. And then for that, they don't have a problem paying 10, 20 times your revenue or whatever metric will make you happy so that they can make it to 100 or 1,000. So that's some kind of interesting thing also regarding early customers on getting the visibility around it. Okay, any other question? Or comments? Yes. Either you speak loud or give it a mic. Okay.
I was intrigued to hear a discussion about cap table, and I mean, after one or two rounds, often there are difficult cap tables in early stage companies. Are the panelists prepared to actually clean up the cap table and buy out people at the early stage? Because often, historically, the convention has been the money was going to the company to be used rather than to be used to buy out. But presumably, we've seen secondaries more
Yes,
at late stages.
So I can talk about our case, and also I've just happened to have listened to the 20-minute VC interview of the SoftBank GP. So they do like the biggest round, as you can imagine, and they do a lot of secondaries. They buy out part or so of the early investors, pretty much in quite a lot of their deals. At earlier stages, I think you can probably start buying angels from like A, B rounds. Because they start with angel round, then you have maybe one or two seeds, so it's kind of already the third round for them, and it's a very different mindset than VCs. But what's your experience with secondaries and buying out, either selling some of your shares or buying some of the shares of the early
At early
investors?
stage, not very common.
Not very common at early stage. From series what B you would see?
Yeah, I would
From
say
series
that,
B.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably the biggest secondary investor in this panel, I think. I mean, we do both primary and secondary, depends on the situation. I think what you want to watch for is that someone becomes, in the active management team, becomes demotivated because they already become wealthy before the exit. But we don't consider, taking $1 million off the table in a fast-growing B round so someone can like buy their house and keep recommitting to the business. I think that's not a problem for us.
So basically, house level exit,
House
like a partial stake for the
house plus
founders.
vacation house,
Vacation house.
But it's not untold riches. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where you're going.
Yeah. Or a small flat in Knightsbridge.
Okay, fair enough. Actually, as an angel investor, I've had opportunities to do secondary sale, and actually I missed in one company. It raised like seed, invested in seed, that did a second seed, that A, B, C. I was like, oh, it's doing well. And then nothing happened for 3 years. And then they did kind of like a quick sale. And only the seed investors made some money. I should have sold half of the shares at B or C.
I mean, sometimes
I didn't think this way.
in really successful business models, the company doesn't need any cash. The only way to get into the cap table is the secondary. depends on the
Okay,
service.
that's interesting. Okay, any other question? Yes.
Do you think we should be worrying about the diversity issue with founders and the lack of money being female?
Diversity question. I think it has a place, so please.
I'll give you one anecdote. So as I mentioned, we investors in Graphcore, and as you can hear, I'm French. And we had a big discussion with the CTO of Graphcore last year, and he said, you know, Olivier, I'm going to hire a lot of engineers in France. And it's like, great, finally! It's like, oh no, not because they are French, but because France is the country where I've got the better chance to find lady doing engineering. So I think this awareness is coming up. Graphcore is the only company in our portfolio is doing a gender pay gap analysis. They don't need to, obviously, but I think the awareness is coming up, which is good.
Any other insights?
Yeah, I agree. It's hard, especially in hardware and deep tech engineering.
There's enough electrical engineers, mechanical engineers.
Yeah, we've scoured the market for female founders. We have a number in our portfolio, but they are the exception, not the rule. And it's not because we don't look, we don't want to invest. It is hard to find them. And especially in the deep tech engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering spaces, they are difficult to find.
I think you need to do your best to overcome any unconscious bias that you might have. I think that takes work. I think you need to look hard and make sure you're considering all the candidates. I think that underrepresented candidates are often some of the best ones, but you may need to look harder to make sure you see the entire field.
And for us, it's about diversity of thought. It doesn't really matter what it is, it's diversity of thought. And we're just going to so many boards in that early stage, and they're all male, let's say, all from very similar backgrounds, but they all want change, especially a lot of boards are sitting in Cambridge. They don't sit there and say, it's okay like this. Everybody's really conscious of it and trying to do it in the right way. It's about diversity of thought. And that's what we focus on.
It's interesting you mentioned that because in SOSV, after we signed the first check for the startups, before we signed the second, we asked all the founding teams to do some kind of a management preference test. It's called the HBDI test, for those of you familiar with that. And it helps basically them grade themselves and their co-founders in terms of their preference in management style. And there's kind of 4 different categories. There's kind of a visionary, kind of entrepreneurship aspect, like risk-taking. The other one is about the more analytical mindset, more engineering mindset, you'd say. Third one is more organizational. And the fourth one is about communication skills, generally, and more emotional. And what we found is that many of our teams are very strong in entrepreneurial, analytical mindsets, and quite weak in organizational and communication, which is actually a problem if you want to build a business. So we make them aware of that, and then they realize that they need to probably round up their team with somebody who can talk about the business in a more approachable manner, and also get things done in terms of keeping on track on schedule, on shipping something. And we have, we're very early stage investors, so we're kind of ahead in terms of the funnel transition, because there's the pipeline problem, like not enough females, so not enough investments and all that thing. But because there's more and more female engineers, female entrepreneurs, we're at the front line. So we see about, so in hardware is about 20%. In biotech, there's a lot more, it's like 30+%. And what was interesting is to notice that a number of the female founders tend to be much better at those other 2 categories, or grade higher than the male founders in organization and communication. So how to say if it's cause or correlation, you never know. But it's interesting because it means that in addition to also having like a female scientist or female engineers, you have generally a better rounded team this way. I agree that the key is not gender. The key is about mindset and skill set. Because what's so magic about gender? Like, I don't know. Like, nobody seems to be able to articulate it. But this was interesting data across about 1,000 founders about what actually was brought to the table by those co-founders. So that was kind of interesting thing we noticed in our portfolio.
But then I'd add to what you said, and what's wrong in our country, several things at the moment. One of the things that's wrong is what they're taught. The children are taught at school, and which computer languages. I don't know if anyone's got their children who are doing like GCSE computers or anything like that. They're taught completely ridiculous languages, and we should be doing like Denmark is and all these other countries. I don't know about France, but probably they're teaching Python in primary schools. So these kids are just doing really great stuff from early days all the way through.
Well, that's all Haskell.
And Haskell as well, exactly. Lots of little doodles like that, I'm sure. But they're actually got an understanding of this technology that's actually being used. And I just think the stuff they're learning in school is just wrong. So we do need to change our STEM. And I think that would bring, if you're on that.
I mean, there's a bit of a cargo cult around STEM education.
Yeah. That would
Yeah.
bring potentially more females through if that's where the question was going.
Yes?
What hasn't been touched at all, and I did a lot of research at Stanford on this, is early stage tech internationalization, and particularly if you don't have a domestic market for your solution. And so if you can, from a European perspective, let's assume the key market might be, say in New York, or it might be Silicon Valley. What stage, I've done the research on this, the largest scale ever. And I'm curious from an investor perspective, what are the do's, don'ts, at what stage, and how do you go international, and what are the key things you look at on bringing a deep tech company over to the valley without necessarily flipping it, which is the shitty old US style. It's a key issue in Europe.
I think the key is talent before market.
So flipping it, you mean sending all the team there,
Yes.
basically becoming a US company.
Yes.
So how do you go international without becoming a fully
And keeping
US
a dual office and skill
So I
on
think
both
the
ends.
first key is talent. Do you have the right talent in the country you're based, or in the city you're based? Again, Graphcore is based in Bristol. They're opening now an office in Cambridge because that's where they need to find the right people. They also have an office in San Francisco, and that's going to be enough for the market. But the key is the talent, and I think Europe has a strong card to play. France, UK, and Germany have very, very deep profile that you can tap into.
I was actually thinking that if you try to relocate all your team to Silicon Valley because it sounds cool, well, you're going to double, triple your expenses. You're going to be the last in line to hire people unless you have something super sexy on the radio network. Just like suicidal move for many companies, particularly early stage companies. Having commercial presence is not a story, but like moving an entire team or building a team there, not necessarily this move.
I think engineering is becoming more remote and multi-site as it is, and I think with the cost structure advantage that we have in Europe and the high talent, it makes sense to keep engineering teams intact where they are, where they're happy, because that talent is mobile themselves and it's other jobs if you don't satisfy them. So I think the U.S. investors used to not want to invest unless it was a U.S. telco. I think this today ones have changed.
But I would say U.S. investors still hesitant to invest unless you have U.S. business. Like they're probably it's quite rare they would invest more European.
There are still some that will make you move. The topco and will make you move the CEO, but not everyone is like that. I think it's a slow process of change. It's going in the right direction. I think.
We like local, big global customers to introduce them into new markets. So if you're working with a big corporate, start of a new project in the new country, wherever that will be, so that you can actually learn first. And that, we found that to be the most successful way of actually getting introduction and growing and expanding in country.
So you piggyback on your customers'
Absolutely.
international presence.
Yes.
I guess that's probably also one of the advantage of that you can provide with the Siemens network.
Yeah, I mean we're present in 195 countries, so we're everywhere.
A lot.
We're a region.
But the one thing I found, which was stunning, is there are 28 European corporates with an innovation/corporate venture team in the Bay Area alone. And what surprised me is that European startups who went over met those teams, and it didn't work in Europe, but once they were introduced by the US team as a very cool solution, the headquarter back team then eventually picked them up, but it was the other way around.
We operate as a global team, and we have a single deal flow, a single meeting for the entire team, so we're kind of coordinated. But our CEO sits in Silicon Valley.
Maybe that's interesting. You can play like a little bit like playing pool. You play some rebounds, then go back home.
I wouldn't recommend actually for entrepreneurs to connect to like multiple people in the target companies, because
they get their first contact over there
as soon as it hits the CRM.
Yeah, it's funny with it's kind of side topic, but we have a new fund. We raising 250 million. We're already close to 18, and things are going pretty well. But we got investment from a number of companies. One of them is Honda that made it public. And you say, oh, wow, you got a Japanese company. Well, that was from the US team. So that was quite interesting. That go back from the So they really use those as scouts and kind of trust them with the filtering process, and they don't. Because the US teams tend to see a lot more deal flow, a lot more sophisticated startups and teams, so the quality probably tend to be higher, and they maybe learn faster as well. So that might be one advantage of a US team recommendation, yes. Okay, we're going to take one last question to see we already got a bit over time, so one final question, yes?
Does the panel members own Bitcoin or not?
Okay. Do you own Bitcoin? No, it's not exactly the topic. I have Ethereum. I'm very sad about it. Okay, we're going to take one more question then.
Sadly, no.
Yes, you had a question? No. Yes.
So we've got over $1 trillion tied up in unicorns.
Please.
So we've got over $1 trillion tied up in unicorns. The term was invented in 2013. Do you just worry that a lot of the decisions that we're making might be at a skew point in the cycle?
We're veering away from the deep tech seed topic. What do you think about the trillion in unicorns?
Depends what percentage you own of each one.
I mean, I guess SoftBank doesn't seem overly worried. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most companies won't be unicorns. So yes, think big. We always advise our companies, have a big vision. Yeah. The odds are you will not become a unicorn. That does not mean you won't be successful. So
timing the exit is also...
Timing the exit at the right time in the market is so much more important than that valuation figure.
I'm going to take one more because I'm a little bit frustrated by this question.
Hi, Nolan from 24 Haymarket. If you can share, I would love to understand if there's one company maybe in each of your anti-portfolio that you're just like, oh, crud, I missed that, and why do you think you missed it?
Okay. So one company you passed on that you regret passing on, and why did you make that decision at the time? Yes, go ahead.
I had the opportunity to meet Supercell.
Yes.
For the Friends and Family round. Because I had a Finnish connection. I was born in Finland, and I had gotten familiar with a Finnish entrepreneur back in 2006 or so, and he founded a venture firm, which became Lifeline Ventures, and he brought Supercell to me, but I was at the time in a growth fund, and we were not doing seed investing. Certainly not.
Could have done a little angel thing with your friend.
There were a little bit of restrictions in that situation for making early investments. So we're still friends, though.
I meant to really early on too, but I didn't look at it as an angel investment because they raised a pretty big round very quickly.